Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to the Awakening and Wondering WTF podcast. Rosanna Hanna's here with some Rosy Glow magic. And for those of you who are new to this, Rosy Glow is the frequency of divine grace, which allows us to let go easily of what no longer serves us through the power of revelation. Those aha moments that suddenly allow you to see the clouds parting, the clarity in front to be able to make a shift in your life that hasn't been possible before. And on that basis, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to the wonderful Emma Buggy, who I have known, I've had the pleasure of knowing for several years. And Emma is a graduate of the Fearless, Loved Up and Free to Be Me program. So she has a very active multidimensional consciousness, but she is also a trainer in authentic and compassionate communication. And I have been wanting to interview Emma for ages and ages about how we could actually introduce compassionate and authentic communication in the entertainment industry and media, and what it would look like if we were actually speaking from the heart and communicating in a whole new way and modeling that for everybody, because the majority of the world watches television or listens to the radio, watches movies. And so we have this phenomenal opportunity to be able to re-educate the public. That's how I see it, in terms of how we can actually speak to each other so we can hear what is needed to be heard in order to be able to meet the needs and be solution focused rather than constantly accentuating and energizing the problem. And I am going to invite Emma to introduce herself, but I also just want to say that we have in common a passion for pregnancy and birth and how these early influences really shape us as adults, and how important it is for us to understand this connection between who we were when we were growing and developing and who we've become as adults. And what we perceive as normal is very much down to what we've been exposed to. And this is why the media and the entertainment industry is so important, because we are all exposed to them unless we choose to opt out. And yet we all have different backgrounds in terms of how we start off in life. So we'll be exploring that. But first of all, I'm going to take it all over to Emma and ask you to introduce yourself, Emma, and your beautiful company, Empath Art. Hello.
Hi, Rosie. Thank you so much for your introduction. It's making me quite excited to get into the topic already. And before I even mention my company, if I bring myself authentically, I just want to say that, like, oh, wow, I noticed that my heart is beating a little bit faster being on a podcast and somehow wanting to relax into sharing with you what's really important to both of us. And I could easily hide that part of myself right now, but I feel so passionate about wanting to be real and saying, yeah, that part of me is alive right now. I want to tend to it, to connect to it. And saying that, I already relax.
I'm right with you, sister. That was beautiful. Thank you, because that's a big part of it.
So, yeah, Empath Art is my company. What I basically offer there is I work with couples and with individuals, supporting them to move beyond the rhetoric of right and wrong thinking, good and bad, comparisons. We're always comparing ourselves to one another, to the world around us. Basically, this language that we are saturated in with the world around us, literally from the first day that we come into the world. People are looking at us and thinking how cute or not cute we are, how good we are at school or not good at school, whether we're able to pass the reading test or not. And immediately this creates a system of judgments and comparisons. So that's the language that we're saturated in. And it's no wonder that that's the way that we communicate, firstly with ourselves. You should be better at this, you should be better at that. And then with our partners, our parents, our teachers, our friends, our work companions and associates. And so my job is to work with people to support them, firstly, to understand what's really going on underneath all of that language and find the gold, because actually what we're always trying to say is something that's very important to us. You know, we're trying to get across something really important when we speak in those tragic ways. So helping people to understand that, and then helping them to communicate that to one another and to listen to each other from that same space of curiosity and wondering, what is it that you're really trying to say when you call me an effing idiot? I'm curious. I'm wanting to go underneath the words and meet the heart that's obviously in a lot of pain and trying to tell me something important.
I love that you've actually gone straight there, actually, because one of the things I definitely wanted to pick up on was something we had in an earlier conversation, which is like, can you like be authentic and compassionate in your communication and call someone a name or swear at them? And you were like, yes, of course you can. I'm sure it's contextual, but the reality, I love what you've just said. And I think the language that we're in different worlds, but we are totally coming together in this idea. And I talk a lot about being solution focused rather than problem focused, because I see the world around us is still very much in a traumatized state. And why that is just generational trauma that has been passed from one generation to the next. And by trauma, I mean unprocessed pain. You know, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, or spiritual, or all of them, some of the above. And we've never had the tools to actually be able to process that pain. So it's kind of been shoved to the next generation to deal with, next generation to deal with. And now we have at least 60 years worth of research around prenatal and neonatal influences, the first 7 years of life, and obviously communication as well. So we don't have that excuse anymore. We've got the resource. We know what needs to happen. It just needs to be implemented. One thing you did so eloquently was you said it so beautifully. It was like, okay, in order for us to have a solution, we need to understand what the need is. It's like, absolutely, whether you talk about a personal relationship between a mother and a child, a father and a child, a partnership, or anything, colleagues, or you're talking about something much bigger, like huge wars and how do we resolve those wars.
Absolutely.
You said something so beautiful about the fact that we need to be heard and our pain needs to be acknowledged. Do you want to speak to that for a sec?
Yeah, and I think it comes really interestingly when you say about being solution focused. I equally want to hold alongside that in order to get to solutions, just like you're saying, in order to get there, we need that sense of fully being heard in our difficulty, our pain, our anger, our stress, our longing for something which isn't happening. And we need to do that through listening. And when someone receives like the full presence and listening of another person, it's absolutely magical what happens. Like I hold empathy circles every week and people come in and, you know, they're holding their bodies with stress and they're coming back from work and all these different things. And by the end, there is this absolute lightness. Oxytocin is flooding the system simply because they've listened to one another. And what happens in conflict is that you have two traumatized people, you have two people that are holding something very important to them, and they're both trying to say what's important to them at the same time, and neither of them have space to hear the other person. So you are left in this thing of, I want to be heard. No, I want to be heard, but I have something important, but I have something important, but listen to me, The thing is that no one gets heard, and that's where conflict and war happens. And actually, the next part of what I'd love to say about that is what's really tragic is that when we're in conflict, we're never actually arguing about the important thing that we need, because needs are universal. So I have a need for safety. you have a need for safety. You and I can both absolutely understand what that means to us, right?
Yeah.
And so does every other person on this planet.
Yeah.
However, it's how I want to feel safe that might be in conflict with how you want to feel safe. So I might say, right now, my need for safety, I want it to be met by me closing the door and going into my room and turning off the lights and having some time to myself. And your need for safety, if you were my partner, for example, might be, well, actually, I want us to have a conversation and I want you to give me a hug. And boom, we have an argument. Not because of what we need, but how we go about meeting those needs. And so what I'm interested in is how can we become more creative about looking for the multi-dimensional ways that we can meet our needs so that we're more resourceful as a community and as partners, as friends, and also within ourselves. And we're not stuck on the only way I can feel safe is if you do it my way.
I love that you're saying this, because we're talking here about understanding each other's languages, right? And not making one right and one wrong, but just being curious. You also mentioned creativity, which I link to imagination. And from everything I've learned about early life and how we're programmed, the brain is a computer. It's not in itself the creative resource for anything new other than what has happened in the past, right? But through our imagination, which is our creativity, we can start to explore what else is possible, right?
Yes.
And that is how, it's not like, if the brain is a sort of a filing center, if you like, of all that's ever happened, and it's brilliant at storing all this information and the inherited information so that we're trying to protect, but we're really in this sort of survival mode rather than thrive mode, which is not the oxytocin path, it's the adrenaline path. So I love that you've mentioned oxytocin as well. Basically, we're in a position where we're constantly trying to create a solution from a problem-focused mindset.
Yeah.
Right. and if we keep looking back for how to deal with it, we're only ever going to create the same in the future. We can't create something different, but we can use the brain to access our creativity, and our imagination, because the hypothalamus can't tell the difference between what is real and what's imagined when it comes to stress, right? So like with anything, if we know what we don't want, we can start to get a sense of, okay, what's the opposite of that? You can play games to start to build, right?
Yes.
A new reality. And that's what we need to do. And suddenly everyone's in, because it's fun and exciting and the potential is something different. Let's just very quickly go, because I want us to move on to the TV and the entertainment industry as quickly as possible, because there's a lot there, right? But in this whole adrenaline, I talk quite a lot about the fact that the world is addicted to adrenaline, and we need to shift that addiction from adrenaline to oxytocin, because our entertainment industry fuels that addiction to adrenaline. It's like chicken and an egg. It doesn't really matter what came first. It's perpetuated because it's what we know, right? So how can we go from this addiction to adrenaline to an addiction to oxytocin? And I say addiction because anything you do repetitively is, something that you're building a connection to, right? Like we get addicted to meditating or yoga or breathing deeply because we know it's good for us. So I don't want to use the word addiction in a negative context. I'm saying it's a pattern we repeat and we right? So what I've understood is you kind of have to go into, okay, this is where we're at, where do we want to be? And we create a bridge by acknowledging the pain, acknowledging the situation, acknowledging the problem, if you like, but not dwelling in it and going down the rabbit hole, other than to say, okay, what do we want to do with this? And I'm really interested in how the entertainment industry, everything we watch, listen to, and read has the potential to either reinforce those old stories and that old paradigm, which is not what we're going to create a new world from, or how we're going to create something new from it. And for you, I mean, how do you feel about the fact, for example, I say fact, but do you believe there's gaslighting going on in the entertainment industry, in the media, in the way that newspapers portray things? Like, do you feel the language is abusive? Do you feel that it is basically making people feel there is only one way to look at something? I mean, what's your overall take on that? And gaslighting, actually, so anyone who doesn't understand it.
Yeah, so interesting that you bring up the word gaslighting, because I was wanting to write a blog on what do we mean when we say gaslighting or narcissism and other labels, because for me it's really always about human beings trying to communicate something that's important to them to another set of human beings, and they're using tragic language. If I call the media industry gaslighting, or if I say that they are trying to push something, it might be true. There might be some element of truth to that, right? But I'm not then able to see the human beings, the actual human beings who are doing their job, because they are holding something that's absolutely crucial, of absolute importance to them. And they are only trying with the language that they can, with the tools that they have, to express what's important to them. And the tragedy is that perhaps, yes, they are stuck in the only way that we can move through is this solution that we're offering, or this language that we're using. Mm-hmm. And I really just see that as like lack of education, lack of creativity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not that they are, I don't see it as like the media are trying to do something monstrous. I actually imagine them to be a bunch of really beautiful human beings who want the best for the world, but they haven't got that creative hat on. They're seeing it through a certain set of glasses, and that means through this set of glasses, there's only this way that things can happen. There's only this way that we can have peace. And this is the only way that we can portray what's going on in the world, and that people will listen and understand.
Oh, so well put. Okay, so we're now talking about multidimensional. We're talking about 3D world, 4D world, 5D world, and beyond. And what you just described to me was how to see things in a perspective that allows something new to occur. It's the moving beyond judgment, moving beyond duality of right and wrong.
Yes.
And actually accepting polarity, that there are polarized views. Yeah. Right. But how can we now shift this collective consciousness to one that isn't basically fear focused and is allowing it to be possible for love to win? Yeah. And I mean, look, we've heard little things in the past like sex sells, fear sells, it's compelling. It feeds that addiction, right? Whatever it is. And we're just so wired to anything that alerts us to danger, right? So that seems to be what hooks us in. But if we make a little segue just to TV for a sec, because I used to be heavily addicted to television. Like seriously, as an 18-year-old, pretty overweight myself because I spent a lot of time on the sofa with my TV guide, and I was watching EastEnders, Home and Away, Neighbours, Family Affairs. I think it was Family Affairs. I can't remember what it was called now. There were at least 5 or 6 different soap operas that I was addicted to. And the severity of this addiction only dawned on me after I'd had my daughter, and I would sit in front of the telly breastfeeding her, and she would hear a theme tune from one of those actual TV programs, and she would stop, turn her head to the television. And I was like, holy Moses, wow, these were her lullabies. Not just were these her lullabies, but every emotion that I felt, because I'm watching this entertainment, I'm either getting stressed or laughing or whatever. Like, there's always a cliffhanger that keeps you to come to the next one. And yet, when you actually look at the history, it's the same blinking cliffhangers. So-and-so is going to do this to so-and-so. You know what's coming, but you're compelled to watch. And I don't think I saw one example of what I would say healthy, loving communication between two people. I saw what I would say the worst of the worst. and it gets perpetuated. So that's all being fed as information when we're pregnant to our unborn children about the world that they're going to come into. They don't know whether it's real or whether it's a TV show, because we're having a physiological response. So there is a level of responsibility we need to become aware of now, because you talked about from when they're born onwards, but it's also well before, right?
Yeah, and I hear it as, Rosie, that you really want us to, and the entertainment industry, to take responsibility for the kind of message, image, and culture that we are putting out there into the world, and saying this is the norm. And I imagine what you're wanting to hear is, actually, there's a great quote from Marshall Rosenberg. He says, get very clear about the kind of world we would like, and then start living that way. So it's like, what is it that, it's like, how is it that we want to live, and how is it that we want to see life being lived, so that we are influenced and inspired by our needs, a world where our needs are being met in a certain way, rather than a world where we are always fighting to get them.
Yes, exactly. So the role of a creative, as I see it, is, what is the world you want to create? You've got this power. So what are you going to do with it? Like, are you going to create more of the same? Are you creating from your wounded, unhealed self? Are you creating from your soul self because you have a vision that you're like, wouldn't it be amazing if the world was more like this? Let's put this out there, right? And, I love this term. Like, for me, I say it a lot in my coaching: life imitates art, so you better make that art good. Now, whether, art imitates life, and it's originally, it doesn't really matter. It's where we are now, what is perpetuating this cycle, and where can we create these circuit breakers so that we can allow something different to come from it, right? And so far, the only option those of us who kind of grow in consciousness around this have is to turn the TV and the radio off. Right?
Absolutely,
There is some alternate media out there. There's Gaia TV, there's other bits and bobs, but I'm not seeing a whole genre of movies or TV series. I'm seeing documentaries, which is nice, but we need fiction. We need positive narrative in fiction form in the mainstream. That's how I see the fastest thing, because even if we, I'm always looking at how pregnant women are portrayed in anything, TV series or a movie, right? I'm always looking at how they're sitting, what is said about their pregnancy. Oh, so-and-so is going to need, I'm going to need to be induced because of X, Y, Z. It's like, well, who told you that? And have you explored other options? You never see that, happening. The most positive things I've seen to this day are, I think it was in Man of Steel, I saw Superman's mum give birth to him standing up, knees bent. She wasn't in a deep squat, which is good because some bodies don't really go with that. But she was surrounded by women and she was giving birth in an empowered way. Another thing I saw recently was, I think it's Meeting Anna. I can't remember the TV series on Netflix, but it's Sondra Rhimes has put it out there. And you see this pregnant woman like in pain, and a man comes along who is someone else's husband, but he's been there many times, and he just pushes her hips a certain way that the pain completely goes away. Now, I know these moves as a doula and as a woman who has spent many years working with birth and positive intervention methods. And I'm like, thank God, yes, it's in it. Yes, we want to see this. You can just affect hip and pelvic pain through the right kind of pressure and the right kind of alignment. More than that, though, I'd like to see that, if there's an argument going on, the pregnant woman saying, can you take that outside, please? Because I'm pregnant. Don't need that energy around me. There's so many ways we could go. And, let's just stop having women giving birth on their backs, straining like they're doing a poo and wondering why they're traumatized afterwards. You're setting this up. This is what women expect. What do you want to speak to in terms of TV?
Well, firstly, I just want to respect what you were just saying there, and just how painful it is to sort of see that the only narrative that's being portrayed is one where the woman doesn't have a voice or a choice, and that her innate sense of self and inner knowing is not given a chance to even be explored. And I really hear, when I hear you speaking about this topic again and again, I really hear you wanting to go to that place of like, where can we ask the woman, what is it that she wants to happen? Can we check, how is it her body feeling? What is she feeling intuitively that could happen or needs to happen? And that sense of intuition is like totally switched off, because, you know, we're in a culture where hospitals, nurses, doctors are so exhausted and so overrun that they're just trying to push women in and out as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. And also, I imagine doing the best that they can with the knowledge that they have to take care of that woman's pain by perhaps giving her an epidural or telling her to push in a certain way or to lie in a certain way. So of course, we don't want to take away from the immense care that is actually in the intention of the doctors and nurses, but also hold alongside that, like, just the tragedy that that there isn't another perspective being portrayed in the mainstream media. Or for most women, you know, I've been pregnant myself twice and I've had 2 miscarriages, and I was never once presented an option of home birthing. It was really quite a lonely journey for me, and it was only because of the work that I've done with you and my own research into orgasmic birthing and other things that I found ways that felt more supportive for me. And I also found myself falling into the system because I just needed something in that moment that would hold me in a moment of stress, and I went with what was available.
Well, you're incredibly vulnerable. I mean, when we're going through a pregnancy, or we're wanting to have a baby, or a miscarriage, or we're in labor, we are so vulnerable, and literally we will defer to external authority because we want to feel safe. And our programming is that you listen to what others tell you to do, right? You don't listen inside. And I mean, I want to remind you of something you said you wanted to talk about, because I remember, and this is the link, you know, our fertility, our sexuality, our creativity are very linked, because so many women have very painful periods, right? Or they have a negative relationship with their menstrual cycle. And again, there's a lot of conditioning around that, religious, societal, you know, even our advertising is like, oh, wear white, take this painkiller, and, you know, go and act like you're not even menstruating right now. And we've received this messaging from so early that
and you don't take time off work. Absolutely.
No,
take a painkiller and get over it, woman.
Yeah, exactly. So shut down. And, you know, again, we're not looking to blame anyone here. Like, the conversation is not about blame. It's acknowledging that there are issues that need addressing, and they're all related to each other. But we could go on a massive birth tangent. Do you want to just say what your experience has been in terms of your menstrual cycle and this journey you've been on quickly?
Yeah, and I'll try and do it shortly, because I know you want to get to the entertainment stuff. But basically, I've been through years of absolutely horrendous period pains, to the point where I couldn't leave my bed, and I would just be clutching my stomach for the whole first 2 days. And the whole lead up, I was going through really, really intense PMS. My poor partner at the time had me absolutely screaming at him for just looking my way. And I tried everything, every herbal remedy out there, you name it, including drinking cannabis tea, meditation, so many things. And of course, those things supported me in to a certain extent, but the intensity of the pain never stopped. It was always there. And when I actually miscarried, I was reading about orgasmic birthing, and I started to get really curious about this as a concept, that actually pleasure and pain are basically the same thing. Well, not the same thing, but they're so interlinked. They are ultimately sensations. Mm-hmm. Pleasure and pain is sensation in the body. Mm-hmm. And I have had some training in mindfulness. I use that a lot in NVC. It's an integral part of the process of compassionate communication. So I was starting to kind of go, what is this pain that I'm feeling? Like getting really curious, like, what does it feel like? What actually is that? Like, and really going right into the center of the pain, like right to the middle of it and feeling it fully, almost allowing it to kind of vibrate and take over my whole body. And what I found when I did that, and I wasn't looking for it to change, that's the crucial point. It became not just less painful, but actually orgasmic.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not at the point where I can just do that with every period, but certainly if I am in a relaxed space and I'm somewhere where I can give time to myself, suddenly all of these painful experiences can be something other than that. Sometimes orgasmic, sometimes sensation, sometimes something interesting, but a lot less painful than they were before.
Well, it sounds like to me it's the letting go of the judgment, again, the duality of good and bad, and bringing that curiosity in.
Yeah.
And actually, this is exactly what makes a labor shift. You know, I had a 4-day excruciating labor because every contraction I resisted and pushed against and didn't want and told to fuck off, and, you know, was like doing everything that my body was not going to help me birth this baby, right? But we say a lot through Birthlight, and obviously I spent a lot of time training with them and training others through them. The only way out is through. You have to meet it, you have to come to it, lean into it. And we're all so pain averse, risk averse, like, you know, we've not learned how to handle and move through stuff. So we try and avoid it until it's unavoidable. And yet we've got all these skills now, we've got all these tools, that it's time to kind of, I would say Pandora's box isn't full of nightmares and terrible things. It's full of all these wonderful new opportunities for us to meet ourselves, right? So if we move this along, and we will have many more conversations, I'm sure, because there's so much to go into here. So this is the Meet Emma session. But yeah, in relation to, you know, when we look at TV, for example, and we look at what is fictional. So we have, you know, TV series that we tune into that are fictional, but based on real life. You know, you have actors and actresses that can spend their whole lives playing a character. That just fucks with my head. I can't fathom that. Like, am I me or am I my character, right? And that just brings us into other places. But if you're spending so much time energizing that, it's interesting how it actually influences your worldview, how you show up, what your relationships are like off screen. But what about the reality TV shows? Because these are, you know, we've got art imitating life, which is the sort of soap operas, etc. And you also have that in the blockbuster movies. I'm going to make an effort not to mention the specific names of the TV programs, if that's all right with you, Emma, just so that we're aware of, just talking in a roundabout way. But there are lots of, well, there are several reality TV shows that have occurred in the past, whether it's being on an island or whether it's being in a house and being observed, whether it's being in the jungle. There's lots of different ones, just like in the world of birth and, let's just say, emergency services. There are also TV shows that are very much geared towards a specific type of ward or an emergency service of one description or another. Now, they're made out to be real life, right? But there's obviously a level of orchestration and, you know, you've got to make it interesting, get people hooked. Where I really come unstuck is when it's like the headline is so-and-so's hoping for a natural birth, for example. And then I look at the setup and I'm like, well, good luck with that. You've got about a 3% chance of that happening in this environment. And that's just the environment. That's not even someone speaking to this person. But we've been living in a world where we defer to external authority. In the world of birth and pregnancy, and, you know, I spent years chairing the maternity, being a user rep and then a chair for the Maternity Services Liaison Committee at Croydon University Hospital. So I work very much with the hospitals. There's a real litigation focus. You've got really well-meaning people that want to do their job well, but they're under so much pressure, as we said. And, you know, who is the thing that goes wrong going to be pinned on? So unless we actually stick to the policy as it's outlined, this is what you should do at this point and this point and this point, then, you know, people aren't covered. The people that are there for you in this time of need aren't covered in their decision making. So absolutely, we understand that, but then we have to dig a little deeper and say, well, what is that based on? What are these guidelines based on? Oh, we thought they would all be brilliant evidence, but oh, hold on, some of it's a bit shaky. Maybe we need to review this. So the curiosity has to go in to create the change. But when you actually come along and you're seeing people on reality TV shows communicating with each other, and the way they're communicating is, I don't want to say a judgmental word, but it's just so, complete this for me.
Yeah, I was just going to say, why don't you say the judgmental word, Rosie? Embrace it, and I'll guess what's important for you behind that.
Sure. So, yeah, I just see, well, we have this huge like celebrity focus, right? People wanting to be celebrities, right? Wanting to be seen. So there's this whole look of looking a certain way, acting a certain way. But what I see so often in the communication style is lowest common denominator. It's like really low energy in terms of how to communicate. The worst of the worst, you know, it's like speaking to each other in this way. What does it say? You know, like, do you get what I mean?
Is it something like it's lacking respect for you, or lacking a sense of
It reminds me of the playground. It reminds me of how we gather, you know, we decide who's popular and who we need to side with, and, you know, who's the person to be seen with and all the rest of it. And then we are constantly, I mean, this is the interesting thing about judgment. We're pitching ourselves. Am I as good as, or better than, or more intelligent, or more pretty, or more this than this person? Right. So I'm here, there. Right. Yeah. So that's the crux of it. The language is competitive rather than cooperative. I mean, in a lot of these programs, there is this sense of who's going to win, right?
Yeah.
Because there is that sense of competition.
And is it, Rosie, that what you're really longing to see in these TV shows, and I'll bring it back to the maternity ward programs or the ambulance sort of, you know, ER based shows. I wonder if what you're longing to see there is that the nurses, the doctors, the people who are interacting with the patients, that there's more a sense of cooperation and doing this together and listening to the patient and having a conversation with them, and that's something that you're missing.
Yeah, it's the empowerment, isn't it? Of like, you touched on it earlier. I mean, we're talking about two different things here, obviously, but it's like in situations where someone is vulnerable, their health, their pregnancy, whatever is going on, their safety is threatened in that moment. We have all been conditioned, trained, whatever you want to call it, to defer to external authority. You know, if you've been burgled, you call the police, right? If there's some kind of threat that's beyond you, someone's just had a heart attack in front of you, you call an ambulance, right? And then you kind of defer to the experts to do that bit. But where have we done this so much that we've forgotten we are the expert when it comes to
so you really want people to be empowered to look within, find their own source of energy and intuition and connect to that, and to be able to act from that place rather than from a sense of helplessness and not knowing.
Yes, that, and also the recognition that we have different systems, right? Like, I mean, in health in particular, we have got different systems of health and well-being, and the system that is the mainstream system is based on an allopathic approach to health. It's not a holistic, it's not, you know, mind, body, spirit. It's very much biomechanical. This is the person. And yet we recognize stress is a huge factor in everything, including how our immune system functions. But I think it's more about the open-mindedness of saying, well, look, in my area of expertise, this is what I know. What else have you learned? What have you discovered? What path would you like to take? You know, that's, I would love to see, let's just say as an example, but because I do want to get back to the reality, the more like the things we watch and think, oh, I want to look like so and so, for example, or I want what they've got, sort of thing. I think that's important because it's always being modeled. But you know, if we were to actually look at a model for the future and actually say, all right, well, you know, I would really value a system where we recognize our own inner authority. Those of us who want to take some responsibility and manage our own health, etc., that we're supported to do that. We're not shut down. We're not, you know, I've personally been in situations where I've been told, you know, by my GP, if you loved your child, you would do this, you know. I've been questioned in decisions I've made when I've presented my child to A&E and they're looking at something completely different and going, well, why haven't you done this and why haven't you done that? It's like, because I don't believe that is the right course of action for my child. Well, in my esteemed opinion, you should do. And it's like, okay, well, what do you know about this? What do you know about that? Silence. And I'm like, so you can't talk to me about these things that I've researched, but you're still telling me what to do.
Yeah,
I have a problem with that.
It's mind-boggling for you in a sense that it's like, wow, I've done so much research. I want to have a sense of choice around how I interact with healthcare and what the choices that I make for myself and my daughter. And that it's really frustrating and weird when you have these people who are in positions that seem that they are above your intuition, above your choice, above you. And they're just basically saying, I know what's right for you. You should do it. End of story. That's infuriating for you because it cuts off any part of you that has any choice, any empowerment to make a decision that's more in alignment with what you think would be healthy and right for you and your daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. Bang on. God, I feel understood. Thanks, Emma. Now, let's take this back to our islands and our jungles and our houses and imagine for a moment that, you know, we've got a whole generation of youth that are watching these programs and going, oh, well, you know, in order for me to be loved and popular, I need to look like this. I need to sound like this. I need to do this. I need to do all these things that are being presented to me on the screen.
Yeah, so already we just hear that the need that they have is love and acceptance and wanting to be seen. So I just wanted to bring that in and just say, like, already when you say, in order to be, I need to do X, Y, and Z, that we can connect with how sweet, how beautiful are those needs? How much can we relate to them? We all want to be loved. We all want to be accepted. We all want to be seen by others, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And and the tragedy there is maybe that these TV shows are perhaps representing that the only way or the right way or the best way to meet that need is if you look like this, or if you do a certain thing, or if you compete with one another. And that's where the tragedy lies, because then our young people or anyone watching it, I know that myself, when I watch those shows, I start looking at my tummy. I start going, oh dear.
Yeah.
And I start to judge myself. And I imagine that that's happening for most people who watch those shows.
Well, you know, even if we just look at the fact that, you know, 13 years ago, I'm just trying to think now, 20 years ago, there was no Facebook. I can't remember how long ago it kind of came. There was no social media as we know it, right? And now we're living in a world where there's so much that is attached to how much other people acknowledge us and witness us. When we actually look at youngsters, I mean, I know when I was a kid, I wanted to be a famous pop star because I you know, Madonna was my hero, and I figured that if I had that many people watching me and that many people listening and, you know, loving what I do, then I would feel loved, right? And this is so true for so many of it. We're all looking to belong, right? We're all looking at some level, but we're also looking to state our individuality and who we are as an individual within a whole, if you like, right? And so I just think, what turn could these shows actually take that could be really a healthy modeling for us moving forward? Because they've obviously met a need, And, you know, most of us, when I say most, I'm sorry to be generalist, but in the Western world, what people do to relax is they watch or listen to or participate in some form of entertainment, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, whether it's a magazine telling you what to wear, what to eat, what to look like, whatever, whether it's a TV show or a podcast or whatever, it's all there. And so how could we now engage people and help them be fascinated with being the best version of themselves, and by that the most authentic, as you said, and compassionate? What if that was the best?
Yeah. And I'd love to start, I won't mention names because we're not mentioning names of shows, but there is definitely one show out there that I imagine many people have watched, and it's centered on couples who are going through therapy. We see them actually going through the experience of sharing everything that's on their heart, speaking to each other in these really tragic ways. And we see that the therapist who is listening to them is helping them to actually kind of unpack those patterns, those traumas, those wounds, and get to the place where they're like, okay, my partner sees me in that. My partner sees me in everything that I'm holding. The same is done the other way around. So they see each other and then they move towards like, oh, what can we do? What can I do to help you with that? What can I do to help you with yours? And so you see this transformation of a couple that comes in like, you know, hating each other and leaving with a real sense of togetherness, understanding, and wanting to kind of work as a team.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I love that. And it's brought me to, I think, final points for us to wrap up with is, we know from our kind of multidimensional perspective, so we're not saying that there's a right or there's a wrong, we just know there's a physical world that we call the third dimensional, the programmed world, if you like, that we've been conditioned to. In order to start to break free from that, we have to engage the mind and start questioning and asking what else is possible, which is what I equate as the fourth dimension, when people start exploring alternatives to what their conditioning was. But still very much the realm of the mind. It's this sense of deferring to understanding everything. And then there's an evolution beyond that, which is the realm of the heart, which is what we're talking about. And it's like, you know, how can we create more positive energy in the world, right? How can we create, for me, a world that is peace fueled rather than struggle and you know, problem fueled, as it were? And I think we were talking off camera about the fact that we can clear the memory. We have all these tools for clearing the memory of the past and previous painful experiences. But our nature is holographic. We're not just forward, backward think. There's so much that we're learning about our nature as humans and the power of our consciousness, if you like. And so we also have the expectations of the future that we need to address, because if we rely on the past, we'll only ever create the past in the future, right? And there's that expectation whenever we're in new unfamiliar territory, we're looking for something familiar. So if we're not careful, we will deflect back to what was familiar and what we knew, but we're moving beyond. So if what we knew was, when I'm stressed, I'm going to go and buy a McDonald's, versus when I'm stressed, I'm going to go for a walk or do something.
We're creating new neurological pathways that we can walk.
We have to really reinforce those pathways, which is the power of the entertainment industry and the media. It's like constant reinforcing. We need this positive narrative reinforced again and again and again and again for us to expect it to be normal, right? So if you and I were able to take over the world for a day, what would you do? Like, bringing your expertise into like, for me, I'm interested in the fastest way. I believe in one generation we could actually shift the expectation in terms of dealing with conflict from war to actually being able to meet the need and therefore create a new pathway. So I call that peace, or StarPeace. What do you feel would be the most important place to start to be able to affect this change? Like, are you with me on this entertainment idea? Is there something else that you feel would be more of an option?
I'm definitely with you on the entertainment idea. I mean, I'm with you because I also just don't watch it anymore because I'm so exhausted by constantly trying to translate what people are saying in this tragic language. And I'd love to see more examples like the example that I just gave, where people are being asked to do the inner work and to connect with the wounded parts of themselves in front of, like, you know, a live audience on TV. I think that's something so powerful, because when we show our vulnerabilities and we are welcoming them, accepting them, and celebrating them on live TV, it literally sends out the message that it's okay to be vulnerable. And not only is it okay for it to be vulnerable, it's empowering, because you learn what it is that you are really wanting to understand about yourself. And that gives you the opportunity to change and to grow and to move towards what you really want. So I would love to see more shows that are, particularly the reality shows, I think have the opportunity to do that. I'd love to see that more in the entertainment industry. I'd also love to see that in news. But I think before we get to the news being portrayed in a different way, I think it does come down to changing our education system and changing all of the systems that we are totally entrenched in and saturated in. Our places of work, the places that we spend all of our time in. And I think, for me, at least, the way that I go about doing that is by starting with the family relationship, because all of the people who are in relationships and who have children are going out into the working world and bringing themselves and the way that they communicate out into the working world. But I also think it's important to bring that into businesses, to bring that into schools, and to support teachers to do the work, to do the inner work, so that they can be more empathic towards themselves and therefore to the students. But even in schools, it's the system behind the system, because if the teachers are not not being listened to from above, then they're still going to have that kind of pressure, that overarching, you need to bring these results and you need to do it this way. And that's going to make it almost impossible for the teachers to then bring that empathic quality and spaciousness to the children when they're teaching, because they have all of that expectation from above them. So I think it really requires people who are willing to go out into the world and teach a different way of communicating, a different way of understanding, listening, and expressing ourselves in every single direction. We're undoing the habits of a lifetime. And my teacher, Yoram Mosensen, he would say something like, this habit is thousands of years old. We can't change it like that. We really need to make a collective effort for that to happen. But if every single individual who's making that change on their own is affecting hundreds of people,
thousands, even more.
Thousands.
You've just spoken. I mean, you said teach a different way, but I think it's more, from what you've shown me today, it's model a different way.
It's model a different way. Yeah, thank you actually for saying that, because be the change you want to see in the world. Yeah. I think was it Gandhi who said that?
It was Gandhi. And also, as we change our view of the world around us changes. We have, an energetic impact just because we're seeing through a different lens.
Yeah.
So, perfect finish off here is, I like the but why, the but why that comes when a toddler doesn't ask for why, but says no. It asserts its own power, right? And like, no, my will is no. And then we get to a sort of formative age of 7, 8, whatever, and it's like, but why? Why is it like this? Why is it like that? Then as a teenager, you hit it again, and it's like, good, we need to celebrate this and not squash it, because what you described in the education system is exactly the same in the maternity services. It's like we can't,
Absolutely.
we've got no room to grow. And let's just look at this, because you hit the nail on the head. This is thousands of years old. It's not even one generation. So let's just look at the political leaders, the scientists, the doctors of today's world, but particularly the political leaders. Look at their age. Typically, they are either post-World War babies, first World War or Second World War, right?
Yeah.
Now, did they get given the tools to deal with the unprocessed, unhealed pain? No.
No way.
The survival programming? Yes. Are they saying the only way for me to feel safe is to dominate and assert my will, whether it's for my nation, for my whatever? Yes.
Yeah, of course.
And
because they haven't learned something different. They haven't learned something different, and it's literally, that is the tragedy. It is literally, I see that the world leaders are a group of wounded children, just like all of us, who actually really want to make positive change in the world. They want to protect, to keep people safe, to create growth, to do so many things to make our lives better and their own lives better.
Mm-hmm.
Want to feel more safe and secure within themselves. And the sadness is that it's just the way that politics is structured is that it doesn't have a lot of creativity in it.
No, and it's the systemic.
It does not have a lot of creativity. It doesn't allow for people to think outside of the box, even though there's so many people thinking and so many heads coming together. And I want to say, I have no idea what it's like to be a politician and to hold the weight of all of that responsibility.
No,
I want to say how much empathy I really have for anyone who goes into that role. My goodness.
It's a big thing.
Do crazy things holding all that responsibility.
But we also have, I think we're recognizing how do I put this? Within every system that we have, there seems to be some form of systemic corruption, right?
Yeah.
Can we look at that as ourselves and say, we've got some programs running that just are not aligned with where we want to go, right? Like they're corrupt files, corrupt cells, whatever you want to say. They're not going in that direction. They've got a different agenda. And it is a self-preserving agenda which has its place. But what was true for our ancestors thousands of years ago is not true in today's world unless we keep recreating it. So, the dangers have shifted, but it's all about annihilation at the end of the day, isn't it? It's like, I want to preserve my life or my loved ones or the wider collective. And we now just come back to full circle where we started, which is, what is the need that needs to be met, right? What is the pain that needs to be acknowledged, spoken to?
Yeah. And my guess, because I don't think we can reduce it down to one, but when I hear you speaking there, my guess is that one of the core needs is togetherness, and that's a real mourning that I imagine our society is unconsciously experiencing, because we used to live as tribes in the savannas, in the deserts, in the forests, and now we are so separate from one another. I imagine that there is a mourning of the lack of togetherness, that we're not experiencing this community, this coming together in the worlds in the way that we interact in society. There's so much separation and distance, and us over here and you over there. And I wonder if that's
But you could kind of take that down to this tribal idea and see the seed of it, because we had our own tribes. How did we engage with other tribes? And how did we decide to live, when we actually didn't have distance between us? And also, whatever tribe you were born into, you will have embodied that tribe's perception of what is and what isn't, right? So in a way, we've got to this point of evolution, which might look more like devolution in humanity, where we have separated out so that we can, if you like, unplug from that, plug into another level, which is this thrive paradigm, that the heart, the coming from the soul energy, I would say, in humanity, rather than just the biomechanical needs that we have, right? You know, we have our basic needs, but as we have those met, we kind of need more. Like there's that sense of our connection to the divine, etc., which is another conversation. But I feel like we're being given an amazing opportunity. If we look at where we are now, it is about, okay, we came from this, we've created this, now what do we want to create moving forward?
Yes.
What would a global tribe look like? There isn't a forced, we all have to be the same and we're monitored, and if we're not that way, we're penalized. But what are these needs we all have, and how can we actually meet them and meet the need for our own individual expression as well, which is what's been squashed and pushed for so long. Emma, we could go on and on, but I think we need to bring this to a close. So what I would love to invite the audience to let us know what lit them up in this conversation and what they'd like to have more of, because I'd love to invite you back. And in the meantime, if people would like to get in touch with you because they have a recognition of needing to go through a bit of a process of up-leveling their communication skills, how can I want to put it out there that we know, both Emma and I work with creatives on a level where we are influencing, if you like, how things are being put out in the world and what people create and how they create it. And that is because we know we need to reach that level as well in terms of what the public actually receives, right? But for your, I don't want to say average human beings, that's just so wrong. But what I mean is for all of us in our day-to-day relationships, if anyone is actually finding that they need to, well, they want to speak to you and look at what can be done in terms of their relationship with themselves and others, what would you say? How can they get in touch?
Well, first of all, just as a finishing of what you were saying at the end of the kind of conversation and linking that into what people can do if they want to experience that growth, is that every single conflict is an opportunity for growth. Every single conflict is an opportunity for growth and for learning and for moving towards what you actually want, rather than saying, I don't want that. So if people want to experience that sort of opportunity to transform conflicts into gold, they can find me on my website. So that's www.empathart.com. And via my website, you'll see that I offer a series of different workshops aimed either at couples or at groups. Some of them are online, some of them are in person. So if you're in London, I do also have bi-weekly meetings where people come together and we actually practice listening skills. But I also offer online trainings and one-on-one sessions. And I also work with couples who are experiencing conflict and help them to find the goal together and work through that.
Oh, I love that. So Emma's website, www.empathart.com. For anyone who's in the media and entertainment industry that wants to actually talk to us on a level of what is actually being put out, please go to rosannahannis.com. There is a contact form there that you can actually contact me and my team, and we will then be able to work out how to put you in touch with Emma or where else we might want to go with this. And, you know, I just want to mention StarPeace as we finish this, because the whole reason this podcast got created was about seeding positive narrative into the collective consciousness of humanity. And I truly do believe we can have peace on earth. We're so, this is what we're here for now, 1,000 years of peace. And I feel that people believe, well, there's almost like a subconscious fear of peace and this idea that it's going to be boring. But I really see that peace is a dynamic state, and it's actually how we diffuse conflict, which is why your work is such an important part of this, rather than escalate conflict. And actually to see that conflict in itself is almost like a necessary agent for change, right? Otherwise things don't change. So we have to stand up and go, no, this is not okay. I'm not standing for this anymore. But what else is possible and how can we do it? So, Emma, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, just so glad that you're doing what you're doing in this world. I'm so happy to see you, well, being in a state where you're really in your truth and alignment with your truth. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosie. It's been such a pleasure. Really appreciate you asking me to come on the show.
More to come. Lots of love, everyone. Please subscribe to Rosie Glow YouTube and join us on the StarPeace Telegram channel. Also on Facebook, we have a Facebook page as well. And the whole reason we're going into all these places is they need new positive narratives. So let's create it together. Let's do it with love. Lots of love for now.